Hello, Davis. Welcome. Right here on KDRT 95.7 FM. This is a program about people and organizations that help shape our town. Each Wednesday at 5:30, a different local organization takes the mic to share stories, spotlight their work, and introduce the people behind it all. The goal is simple: to learn what makes these organizations tick and what makes Davis such a special place to call home. This week, we have the Davis Phoenix Coalition, represented by Anoosh Jorjorian, who is the chair of that organization, and she's accompanied by Sareena Crawford, a Ph.D. student of history at UC Davis. The theme song in the background is Mockingbird Rag, written and performed by Davis's very own Roger Kunkel. And again, you're listening to KDRT 95.7 FM and being streamed live at kdrt.org. The views shared on this program belong to the hosts and guests alone and don't necessarily represent KDRT or the broader KDRT community. So, let's get started with this week's organization and host.
Hello, this is Anoosh Jorjorian with the Davis Phoenix Coalition. Welcome, everyone. This week, in honor of Black History Month, we are interviewing Sareena Crawford, who I first found out about through a press release from UC Davis about the research that Sareena and some other students had done investigating the history of people of color in Yolo County, and especially hidden history that had been previously undiscovered. So, Sareena, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
We are so pleased to have you as our guest this week. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what brought you to Davis, and what about your work?
Yeah, so I ended up coming to Davis for my Ph.D. program. I was a English and history undergrad and decided I wanted to go to grad school. So I ended up coming to Davis to get my Ph.D. in history.
So can you talk a little bit about the class that gave rise to this project?
Yeah, so I actually was in a course with Dr. Cecilia Sue, and one day she pulled me into her office and asked if I would like to be a part of the project. It is uncovering diverse histories of Yolo County, and it's in collaboration with the California History Social Science Project. So yeah, we had a class that was a 20th century U.S. survey, and from that we were able to get this wonderful opportunity to do some Yolo County history.
That's fantastic. So how were you able to get started in trying to find some of this history?
Yeah, so we went down to the Yolo County Archives. It's in Woodland. The archivists there are so amazing and so incredibly helpful. We were just going through the archives looking at all sorts of things from probates to maps to wills, and just trying to find anything we could about diverse individuals in Yolo County throughout history.
Fantastic. I want to give a quick plug for archives. You never know what hidden treasures you're going to find. So what was the first piece of information that you found that led you to your larger project?
Yeah, so the first thing that we ended up finding was a photo of the Yolo County Singing Group, which was an African-American group that was connected to the Second Baptist Church in Woodland. It is still a church in Woodland. It was started by the Black community of Woodland. And this picture we found was from the early 1900s, and it came luckily with the names of the individuals who were on there. And from that, we were able to kind of trace their families and trace their lineage and discover that this was a kin group of people who had been, many of them had been formerly enslaved in Missouri that had then traveled to Yolo County, also enslaved or sometimes after emancipation to find their family members.
So tell us a little bit about this. Like, let's dig into that story of how they were Missouri, and how they ended up in Yolo County, of all places.
Yeah, so the family that I trace is, their name is the Winrows. They are the descendants of Marianne Winrow. She ended up having 3 separate husbands, and each husband she had some children with. And so by tracing this family, we were able to see that Marianne Winrow and her sons were initially enslaved in Missouri on plantations in Rawls County, Missouri. From Missouri, they had a couple of their the plantation owners were also family members, so it gets a little bit tricky. So within the plantation owners, they decided they wanted to buy land out in California, move west, and with them they brought enslaved people. Marianne Winrow was one of those people, one of the first Black enslaved women brought to Yolo County, and from there they brought with them 2 of her children, but the rest of her children over time came to Yolo County, whether they ran away from slavery or they came after emancipation.
Okay, so do you know approximately what date that she came as an enslaved person originally?
She came in the late 1850s. One of the first enslaved African Americans, Basil Campbell, came out in about 1854. We know that he came out before her, but she was still in the late 1850s. So that's when you start seeing the first groups of enslaved people and enslavers coming from Missouri.
That's really interesting. It just makes me think of Juneteenth and the fact that the date of Juneteenth had to do with when people learned that enslavement was over and not when it had actually ended. And it makes me wonder if a similar situation happened in Yolo County, where people were technically emancipated before they, in fact, knew that they had been emancipated.
Yeah, surprisingly, they do celebrate Emancipation Day, and they celebrate that on January 1st. So it is a different day than Juneteenth when they did discover, but when we were looking at the Yolo County Singing Club, they also were one of the performers for Emancipation Days. So they knew and they celebrated the fact that they were emancipated. And that is, it's a little known fact that there was enslavement in California. So it was a very important day to those formerly enslaved and their descendants.
That's really important history, I think, for all of our children to know, this shared history that we think of enslavement as something that is separate from California, but in fact, it did happen right here.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about this singing group and how did it form and what was its purpose?
Yeah, so the Yolo County Singing Club formed from the Second Baptist Church in Woodland, and it was forming initially out of their choir. It was just a choir group, but then they started going and performing at different events. There is newspaper articles where they're doing events in people's backyards and for Emancipation Day, but their biggest moment in their time as a group was they performed the comic operetta The Merry Company, which they ended up becoming thought of as the Merry Company. People thought that's what their name was rather than the name of the operetta. Anyway, so they ended up performing that at the Woodland Opera House, and it was to a interracial crowd. So it wasn't just for the Black residents of Woodland, it was for Black and white residents. There are newspaper clippings that also say it was a full crowd and people were laughing along. At the time, a lot of the entertainment that people would have been consuming about Black people would have actually been minstrelsy. But this was completely different than that. What it was doing a respectable form of performance in order to show the respectability of the Woodland community.
Right. So in a sense, showing a human side that most non-Black Woodland residents may not have been familiar with.
Yeah, it's similar to another group that did it, the Fisk Jubilee Singers, who were from the South. They also, it wasn't just them saying that they were, good at singing, or they were not even just to humanize, it was to make them respectable in a sense, to go with those respectability politics and really prove themselves as individuals, as as humans, just as anyone else is, but that have the same values, and to show we have similar values, we are similar. That's why we should be respected.
Makes me think a lot about how the arts for oppressed folks throughout time has been a medium by which we have tried to touch people's hearts and really communicate a commonality that may have been denied to us on a political level.
100%. Yeah, they were definitely making a statement with the way that they dressed, which was very prim and proper. The family-friendly show that they put on, it was all very much a way to show the society they lived in, who they thought they were and who they should be accepted as.
Did this singing group travel at all through California or through other places, or were they primarily local?
They were primarily local, yeah. You will see them go to Sacramento sometimes, but that's typically when they are in connection to the church. So the church was really the hearth of the Black community in Woodland and Yolo County, and they were the ones who put on a lot of these shows, but also were the ones where a lot of these individuals came together to, whether it be celebrate or praise or worship. This is just where the hearth of the community really came together.
That's also a very common theme throughout history. Are there any signs that continue to this day of this Black history in Yolo County and this Black family in Woodland?
Yeah, there are descendants of these families that are still alive. There are elders of the community who have been attempting to get this story out for a long time. That is why we like to say that we are illuminating this story, not discovering it, because the descendants have really, really attempted to have people notice this history, because it really is a beautiful history. It's a history about kinship. It's a history about love and perseverance, not just slavery. And so there are remnants from the descendants and those who are still trying to get the information out that is apart from UC Davis. This is a community story, not a UC Davis story. And I think that's part of why it's so important to talk about it, because, yeah, there was slavery here, but there was also a group of people who were incredibly resilient and made a name for themselves that, we are recognizing now in history.
I don't suppose any recordings survive or were made even of their group.
No, there were no recordings, but we do have the operetta that they performed. So we know what the lyrics were, we know what the music, we could potentially put it on if we wanted to, but we just wouldn't have the exact recordings of it. We just have a photo of them in their costumes from that performance.
I wonder if that's something that the Woodland Opera House would be interested in doing as a reenactment.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and I thought it would be really amazing. In the Woodland Opera House, there is a installation of this exact story, talking about the Yolo Singing Club, as well as the minstrelsy that was happening around the same time, and the church. So at the top of the Woodland Opera House, where they sell concessions, you can see that there, and it tells a lot of this story as well.
That's fantastic. I have a question about the minstrelsy. Were those also local performers, or were those people who were traveling?
They were traveling agencies most of the time. Minstrelsy was oftentimes traveling tropes, so they would go from different opera houses. And there is proof that there was minstrel shows around the same time of the Yolo Singing Club at the Woodland Opera House. There is a photo, again, at the Opera House of a minstrel show of white men who have blackface on. So we recognize that history, but it is very interesting to see that in one vein they are showing some information or showing shows that are degrading Black people, but on the other side they're showing shows that are showing the respectable sides of Black culture as well.
That is so wonderful to find out, and so gratifying that you were able to get into this research and bring it more to light for our community. So we need to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
You're listening to KDRT 95.7 in Davis, California, where the grassroots grow. We're talking with the Davis Phoenix Coalition. Anoosh Jorjorian, the chair of that organization, is discussing with Sareena Crawford, a Ph.D. student at UC Davis, history. Actually, you're a history major, not at UC Davis, history. But anyways, let's get back to it. Here we go.
I'm your host, Anoosh Jorjorian with Davis Phoenix Coalition, and with me today is Sareena Crawford, a PhD student at UC Davis. And so far we've been discussing research that Sareena did into the Black history of Yolo County. We're going to switch gears now and come back to the 21st century. So one of the other projects that Sareena has been involved in has been activating and organizing students at UC Davis. Sareena, do you want to tell us a little bit about how this project developed?
Yeah, so I had a couple of students when I was a teaching assistant for the history of race in America from 1865 to the present. And so when we were doing that course, it was during the same time as the election. There was a lot of political tension and students who were really, really afraid. And looking at the civil rights movement, they got essentially activated from that. They saw what was happening during the civil rights movement and wanted a place where they could essentially emulate that for today's standards. So they came up with a group called Students Navigating Education, Activism, Kinship, and Inclusivity, or SNEAKY. It's very long, but they liked that sneaky little title. So it's a student and community-led organization, and as I mentioned, they base it on the tenets of the civil rights movement, and they emphasize on coalitions and grassroots activism. So as an organization, they seek to socially coordinate within UC Davis and the surrounding communities with a high emphasis on educating and doing education as activism. And so, yeah, SNEAKY is dedicated to fostering a safe space to everyone, making sure everyone feels included, and is open for conversations, debates, and just a place for mutual trust. And one of the taglines of SNEAKY is, SNEAKY isn't just a club, it's kin. Because kind of like the research that I've been doing, kinship is not just blood. It is based off of sometimes proximity, but sometimes values. And with those things, you can build a really, really tight-knit group that transcends just a club or just friendship, that can really feel like kin and can really support the community in amazing ways.
Right, and it resonates a lot with LGBTQ plus principle of chosen family as well.
Exactly, yeah. The logo is actually based off of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. The logo is two hands grabbing each other. One of them is the pride flag and one of them is the flag of a different skin color. So just showing that it's open to all ethnicities, races, sexualities, gender identities, just everyone to have a safe space, but also be able to still learn and have some conversations that may be uncomfortable, but are incredibly necessary for us to continue to grow as a community.
What are some of the aspects of SNCC that this group really felt connected to and really felt like they wanted to recreate?
Yeah, so the idea of students coming together to make a change was the biggest aspect of SNCC that they liked. But they also loved the grassroots part. They very often felt that grassroots organization is not as prevalent as they would like it to be, at least in the UC Davis sphere. And so they wanted to take from, Ella Baker and the tenets of SNCC to really bring a coalition of students together to activate and fight for what they believe is right. It's also a democratic space, so they're voting on the things that they want to activate for and how they want to do that. So it's really a space that is training them to be politically minded citizens, but ones that are able to have their own say. We will try to do things like speech arts and different types of ways for them to be able to express themselves so that they are adequately telling their opinions, but also adequately sharing that with the world as well.
That connects a lot with DPC's principles as well, which is to bring marginalized voices into the center so that people who have experience being marginalized, have experiences of oppression, can speak with their own voices directly to power instead of going through a medium.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. What kind of projects have Sneaky started with this impetus?
Yeah, so a lot of the projects have been community minded. What Sneaky has done is worked with one of the community elders in order to help maintain and protect their ancestral home. So they live in Woodland, and it was one of the first houses built on the other side of the segregated side of the city by one of the Black elders in the community. And so a lot of that has been done is community service around that, and just trying to really help and focus on the community as a place of kinship building. And so doing things like helping archive materials for individuals, not necessarily giving them to archives, but helping so it's easier for those descendants to go through their own paperwork, and helping raise funds for them for things they may need and things along those lines. Really been focusing on the community for right now.
I would really love to figure out ways that we can connect a lot of the research and the work that UC Davis students are doing within the community with our local schools, because we have so many students of color within our school districts, not just Davis, but Woodland, Winters, and so many of these students don't realize that there are histories of people just like themselves that actually are rooted here in Yolo County.
Yeah, and that is what part of the California History Social Science Project was doing as well, with Dr. Cecilia Sue, is they're building a K through 12 curriculum to teach these students in Yolo County. And they're currently doing that right now. Throughout this week, they're going to different elementary schools and showing the curriculum that we have built based off of the research we did for Yolo County diverse histories.
That's fantastic. I want to point out to any students who are listening, a lot of times you may feel that what you're doing in school does not connect to the real world, but here is a concrete example of, especially when you get into higher education, you have the opportunity to do work that can really matter in people's lives.
Yeah, 100%. I think even when especially when I was an undergrad, I too felt that perhaps what I was doing wasn't going to make a huge change in the world. Doing history, you don't necessarily think like, oh, I'm going to do anything massive, but you definitely can help get out stories that mean a lot to people. And you can help people in ways that you may not have expected. I never thought that I would, help be organizing a group for students, but you find ways to bring those voices to the center, and you find ways to help any way that you can, doing whatever you can. So that's why I think, completely separate tangent, but do what you love and you'll find a way to make a passion out of it.
So speaking of that, what is it about history that sparked your love and you decided to pursue a Ph.D. in history?
Yeah, funnily enough, I actually did not want to get a PhD in history to begin with after undergrad. I was going to go to law school, but my final year of my undergrad, I really fell in love with the narratives of history and being able to mix stories with evidence and having the ideas surrounding giving more information on people who don't have information spread. I initially was doing research on African American women in STEM, and then moved over to this project where I'm looking at Black women and how they help build kin groups within Yolo County community in the 1900s and in the early 1900s and late 1800s. So yeah, I ended up loving to tell stories, and the stories I love to tell are about people, because so many of these stories just show the resilience and just the amazing things that people really can do when they set their mind to it.
So can you tell us where, if folks are interested in finding out more about this singing group and any other projects that came out of that class?
Yeah, so the Woodland Opera House has an exhibit as I have mentioned, yeah, their exhibit is on the top floor where you can go to get refreshments. I'd also recommend just seeing a show at the Woodland Opera House. It's amazing. But you could also follow Sneaky on Instagram, which is BSNEAKI. That's a good place to get started there and kind of see what Sneaky's up to. But yeah, those are really the places that that you can find me or the students that I've been working with.
Well, thank you so much, Sareena. That was fantastic. It's so great to make these connections, and it's such a joy to have this conversation with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So this has been an episode of Hello Davis, and I am Anoosh Jorjorian with the Davis Phoenix Coalition, and with me today was Sareena Crawford, a history Ph.D. student with UC Davis. And we have been discussing Sareena's project with finding out more information about Black history in Yolo County and especially Woodland, as well as the group Sneaky, which connects UC Davis students with the larger Yolo County community in order to build power and affect change. So we hope you will join us again next month. And I don't actually know who our guest would be. I should probably have that information, but we haven't decided on that yet. So it'll be a surprise, but I'm sure it will be something equally exciting and fascinating as this month's installment.
And every Wednesday at 5:30, a different local organization takes the mic, sharing stories, spotlighting their work, and introducing the people behind it all. Just a fascinating story we heard today, something I had no idea existed, and yet I drive past these places almost weekly. So it's just really, really great to hear. The goal of Hello Davis is just that, to learn what makes these organizations tick. Again, the theme song is Mockingbird Rag, written and performed by Davis's own Roger Kunkel. You've been listening to KDRT 95.7 in Davis, California. Thank you all.